God's chosen ones, 3 spiritual marks that set you apart. 1. Carries great pain. The whisper you've always heard. You've always felt it, haven't you? That silent pull, like you were meant to notice more, feel deeper, and move differently than those around you. We called it anxiety, overthinking, sensitivity, but heaven called it something else. A mark. Because the ones God chooses, He wires differently. If you've ever walked into a room and felt something shift, or if children, animals, even strangers seem drawn to you without reason, then you're not imagining things. You're not too much. You're just marked for more. And if you're one of God's chosen ones, this message was written in heaven, with your name on it. Grace was only 8 the first time she knew something she shouldn't have. It was the week before the accident. She and her best friend Lila were coloring on the porch when a strange weight settled in Grace's chest. A pressure, like someone had placed a warm coin right under her heart. She looked at Lila and whispered, "Tell your mum not to take the highway tomorrow." Lila just laughed. But the next morning, there was a crash. No one died, thank God, but the car was totaled. Grace never forgot it. And she never spoke of it again. Because how do you explain that your body warned you, that your spirit trembled before anything visible happened? Her mother called it just a coincidence. Her Sunday school teacher said she had an active imagination. Even Grace tried to shake it off. But deep down, something sacred was awakening. She began noticing other moments. When a teacher lied, Grace's skin would tingle. When a stranger walked by with sadness in their eyes, Grace would feel tears well up, even without a word. Animals followed her, babies stared at her, and sometimes her thoughts came true. It wasn't magic, it wasn't pride, it was something else. "I'm not crazy," she whispered into her pillow one night. "I'm just different, but I don't know what for. I'm just different, but I don't know what for." Years passed, but the feeling never left. The knowing grew louder, the silences deeper, and the marks more defined. See, the world doesn't teach you how to handle these signs. It teaches you to fear them, to medicate them, to hide them. But heaven writes these marks into your soul like holy fingerprints. And if you're reading this now, maybe you've carried them too. Maybe you've always felt like an outsider in your own life. Maybe people confide in you without knowing why. Maybe your dreams bleed into reality. Maybe you feel the pain in a room before anyone says a word. Those aren't random. They're sacred. And today we're going to uncover the 3 hidden spiritual marks that God's chosen ones carry. The ones that prove you're not cursed, not forgotten, but called. And the third one? It's the one that almost no one talks about, but it holds the power to rewrite your life from the inside out. So take a breath, listen beyond the noise, and lean in, because you're not here by chance. You're here by assignment. Part 1. The sensing that saves you. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. Grace had only meant to visit for a few minutes, say a prayer, drop off flowers, then leave. But when she stepped off the elevator, her whole body stiffened. She didn't hear a scream. No alarms blared. No one said a word. But something in the atmosphere shifted, like a curtain had dropped in the spirit. She clutched her chest without thinking. Her pulse rose. The lights felt colder, the air thinner. 2 doors down, a nurse stood outside a room, staring, motionless. Her hands trembled just slightly. Grace approached gently. "You okay?" The nurse didn't look at her, just whispered, "They just lost their son. I should have known something was wrong. He was fine this morning." Grace didn't reply. She just sat down beside her. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just let her spirit weep, because she had felt it. Before the words, before the news, before it was confirmed in the physical, she had already grieved in the spirit. Have you ever had that? You walk into a room, and something in you tightens before anyone says a word. You meet someone, and your chest pulses not in attraction, but alarm. You cancel plans at the last minute and later find out something terrible happened where you were going. That's not paranoia. That's not coincidence. That's discernment. The world has no language for it, but heaven calls it the first mark. In 2 Kings 6, the prophet Elisha warned the king of Israel every time the enemy planned an ambush. Not because he was a spy, not because he overheard anyone, but because God revealed it to his spirit. The king of Aram was so disturbed, he accused his own men of treason. But the truth? Elisha was just tuned into a frequency they couldn't hear. That's what happens when you carry this mark. You don't just react to the world. You sense it before it happens, before it forms, before it even knows it's coming. You don't wait for evidence. Your spirit already knows. But let's be honest, living with this mark doesn't always feel like a gift. Sometimes it feels like a burden. People say, "You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. Why can't you just relax?" They don't know you cried before the funeral. They don't know you had the dream before the breakup. They don't know you walked away from the job because your chest said no, even when the paycheck said yes. You don't explain it. You don't even try anymore. Because this mark doesn't speak loud, it speaks deep. A knowing that buzzes in your chest when deception is nearby. A chill down your spine when something dark walks into the room. A heaviness in your body when something is spiritually off. Even your physical body becomes the vessel. Have you ever felt sudden nausea when talking to someone with hidden motives? Gotten a pounding heart in a place that looked safe but wasn't? Had dreams that later came true? That's not your imagination. That's your gift. The Bible calls it discernment. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 2:15, "The person with the Spirit makes judgments about all things, not because they're judgmental, but because they're awake." Grace once walked away from a job offer that looked like a dream. Prestigious, high-paying. Everything in her mind said yes, but her spirit said, "Not this way." Months later, the leader of that ministry was exposed for spiritual abuse. If she had ignored the knowing, you see, this isn't just a personality trait. It's spiritual radar, a divine protection system. And it's not something you earn, it's something heaven installs. And those who carry it, they're often placed on the front lines of awareness. Before the collapse, before the betrayal, before the spiritual war begins, God warns them. So if you've ever thought, "Why do I feel everything so deeply? Do I know things I shouldn't know? Why do I feel exhausted after being in certain rooms?" Here's the truth. You're not weak. You're wired for war. Because the first mark of the chosen ones is the ability to sense what others ignore. And it's not just to protect you. It's to protect those connected to you. You're not early. You're not strange. You're not too much. You are spiritually alert in a world still asleep. And heaven has placed you there on purpose. Part 2. The innocent ones know you. Grace sat on the bench, arms folded, chin tucked, eyes lost in the swirl of orange leaves. She'd come here to escape the noise, not just from people, but from her own racing thoughts. Her spirit had been heavy all week, and she couldn't explain why. But then it happened again. A toddler broke away from his mother, waddled across the grass, and stopped right in front of Grace. No smile, no babbling, just wide, silent eyes, looking straight into her. Then, without invitation, the child climbed onto the bench beside her, reached for her hand, and sat. No fear, no hesitation, just presence. A moment later, a scruffy-looking dog. It's People Klaus Ash Seaton left a time Ebelisha Amau Nave it Hunnet. She glanced around, confused. The mother apologized and gently called the child back. The dog wandered off, but not before licking Grace's hand. She didn't say a word, but she knew what had just happened. "They always know," she whispered. Have you ever experienced that? A baby you've never met stares at you like you're glowing. A dog follows you block after block. A bird lands near you and doesn't fly away. Not coincidence. Recognition. In Matthew 21:16, Jesus quoted the Psalms. "From the lips of children and infants you have ordained praise." Why? Because children and animals still live in the spiritual realm we adults have been taught to forget. They don't judge by how polished your words are, how expensive your clothes are, or how impressive your resume is. They feel spirit. They know frequency. They read truth without needing proof. And when they gravitate toward you with no prompting, no context, it's because something in you is familiar to them. Not your face, your light. When Jesus walked the earth, children ran to him. Why? Because his presence didn't demand. It didn't perform. It simply radiated safety and love. And when you carry that same anointing even in hidden, quiet ways, the innocent can tell. Think of the donkey in Numbers 22, the one who saw the angel in the road when Balaam did not. God opened the animal's eyes before he opened the prophet's. Animals are not lesser beings. They are often more attuned to divine energy than humans. And they respond to what you carry, not by logic, but by instinct. Bed Rogers, Mr. Rogers, once said, when we can be present to the moment with the person we're with. That's what's holy. He wasn't famous for flash. He was famous for presence, for being a sanctuary in human skin. And so are you. So when a child locks eyes with you, or a cat climbs into your lap without invitation, or a stranger's toddler wraps their fingers around yours and won't let go, that's not just cute. That's confirmation. You're not just someone they like. You're someone their spirit recognizes. You carry a spiritual signature that can't be imitated. You radiate alignment. And the purest among us, the children, the animals, the deeply broken, they see it first. Grace once asked herself, why do they keep coming to me? Until one day she heard the whisper of God in her spirit. Because you carry me well. You don't have to preach to reveal God. Sometimes all you have to do, sit on a park bench in silence and let your frequency do the speaking. Because one of the hidden marks of the chosen is that the innocent are drawn to you without knowing why. Part 3. The mind that builds what you haven't seen yet. Grace flipped through the worn pages of her journal, the one she hadn't touched in years. The entries were smudged, some tear-streaked, others hopeful. Then she saw it. A single sentence written in block letters from over a decade ago. Someday, I'll build a space where people heal, not by medicine, but by presence. She'd forgotten she wrote that. But here she was, running a retreat center in the mountains, where people came not for therapy, but to breathe, to cry, to rest. She didn't market it, she didn't push it. It just unfolded, exactly like she'd dreamed. And in that moment she realized, my thoughts weren't just thoughts, they were blueprints. Have you ever noticed that? You think something deeply and it shows up. You picture a conversation and it happens. You imagine a scenario and it finds you. Not once, not twice, but again and again and again. That's not coincidence. It's confirmation. You carry the third spiritual mark. Romans 12:2 says, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Why? Because the mind is the construction site of your destiny. You've been shaping your future without even knowing it. Not through hustle, but through focus. Every vision you held in emotion, every thought you nurtured with belief, every quiet dream you dared to whisper, heaven heard. This isn't the law of attraction. It's the law of divine alignment. It's what Jesus meant in Matthew 9:29 when he said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." Because when you see it clearly in the spirit, it begins forming in the physical. Think of Joseph. He dreamed of ruling, not out of ego, but out of divine vision. His brothers hated him for it, threw him away, but the same vision they buried became the one that rescued them all. But if your most outrageous dreams are actually heaven's instruction? Steve Harvey once said he wrote a check to himself for $10 million, 0 cents before anyone knew his name. Jim Carrey did the same. Tyler Perry wrote plays in poverty, not realizing he was scripting his future abundance. They weren't lucky. They were aligned, and so are you. But here's the tension. This mark, the creative mind, is dangerous if left unguarded, because the same power that brings visions to life can also magnify your fears. What you dwell on will grow. What you replay will repeat. What you speak will seek you. Your thoughts aren't private. They're prayers in motion. Grace remembered another journal entry, one from a dark season. "I feel like I'll always be alone." Months later, relationships broke, doors closed, isolation deepened. It wasn't punishment, it was manifestation. She hadn't realized her mind was building walls while her heart begged for connection. Proverb 23:7 says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." That's not metaphor. That's spiritual architecture. So let me ask you, what thoughts have you been repeating? What images replay in your imagination? What ifs have been stealing your peace? Because the third mark on a chosen one's life is the mind that doesn't just dream, it creates. It's not magic. It's not ego. It's echo of being made in God's image. Genesis 1:27. You were made in the likeness of a creator. So it makes sense that your words, your thoughts, your inner pictures carry creative power. But here's the shift. When you start guarding your thoughts like sacred seeds, when you align imagination with scripture, with love, with divine truth, you stop wishing, you start co-creating, and everything begins to change. You say less, but things move faster. You visualize peace, and peace finds you. You stop striving. You start resonating. You've seen it already, haven't you? The doors that opened without logic. People who showed up just when you needed them. Ideas that kept returning until you acted, and everything aligned. This is the third mark, and it is the most powerful of them all. Because once you realize that your thoughts are tools, that your mind is not just a mirror but a mechanism, you stop asking for signs. You start becoming one. Part 4. The mirror that disturbs the room. Grace hadn't come to be noticed. She came to hide. She wore neutral colors, pulled her hair back, and slipped in during the third worship song, a quiet prayer on her lips. But before she even sat down, she felt it. Heads turned. Not all, but enough to make her wonder. She wasn't loud. She wasn't dressed bold. But her presence made the air shift. One woman smiled at her. Another looked away quickly. A third stared with wet eyes, as if she'd been waiting for Grace without knowing her name. It wasn't flattery. It wasn't fame. It was frequency. Have you ever noticed that? You walk into a room and people look, not because of your appearance, Bill, but because your spirit speaks first. You disturb atmospheres, not with your voice, but with your vibration. In Luke 4:34, Jesus enters the synagogue, and a man possessed by a spirit cries out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us?" Jesus hadn't even said anything yet, but his presence exposed what was hidden. That's what happens when you carry this mark. You don't just exist. You reveal. The fourth mark of the chosen isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's the quiet power of being a mirror, not the kind that flatters, but the kind that reveals. That's why some people open up to you instantly, why others avoid you without cause, why strangers feel seen in your presence and others feel uncomfortable. You don't provoke it, you don't demand it, and you simply carry truth. Robin Williams once said, "Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, always." Do you feel that? Not just emotionally, but spiritually. You sense the ache behind laughter, the lie behind smiles, the yearning behind small talk. You're not trying to judge them. You just see them, and that's what makes you different. You don't just have insight. You are insight. You don't just bring light. You carry it. And that light confronts anything hiding in the dark. This is why, chosen one, your presence will always do one of two things: heal the hungry, unsettle the hiding. You won't always know which until after you walk in, but one thing's for sure: you can't go unnoticed, not because of status, but because of spiritual weight. Grace later found out that the young woman across the aisle had been praying for a sign that very morning. And when she saw Grace, she didn't hear a sermon. She felt peace. Sometimes that's all it takes. Not a word, just a witness. That's the fourth mark. You're not just someone in the crowd. You're someone who shifts the crowd. You change rooms without trying. You wake up souls without preaching. You stir sleeping hearts just by being in rhythm with God. Some will be drawn. Some will be disturbed. But all will be changed. Because when you walk in your true essence, you don't carry charm, you carry presence. And presence always speaks louder than noise. Part 5. The assignment that comes with the marks. Grace stared at the blank page. The 3 marks now clear in her soul. The knowing, the drawing, the creating. But something inside her whispered, "Now that you know, what will you do?" She didn't have an answer. Not right away. Because here's the truth no one says out loud. Once you recognize you're marked, you're also required. To carry these spiritual marks is not just identity, it's assignment. You weren't given discernment to stay silent. You weren't given presence to shrink back. You weren't given creation power to build for yourself alone. You were given heaven's DNA to rewrite what's been broken. In Luke 12:48, Jesus said, "To whom much is given, much will be required." And the requirement is this: live awakened, live obedient, live aligned. You've already noticed it, haven't you? Percy stopped his marathon to match his wife's pace. That your sensitivity can't be numbed. Be created, that your silence carries weight. That distractions feel deadly to your purpose. That's because the room for error in a chosen one's life is smaller. Not because God is cruel, but because the calling is heavier. Grace once tried to walk away from her calling after heartbreak, after betrayal, after too many unanswered prayers. She stopped writing, she stopped listening, tried to just be normal. But the silence didn't give her peace. It made her soul itch. Until one day God whispered, "Grace, I didn't give you these marks for decoration. I gave them to you for activation." That's when she realized, these marks are not permission to boast. They are a call to build, to create refuge where others feel rejected, to speak light where others collapse in shame, to see ahead, not for applause, but for protection. You were never meant to blend in. Your frequency was designed to disturb darkness. And yes, that comes with cost. There will be days of isolation, nights of wrestling, moments of invisible warfare, because the enemy doesn't attack the unmarked. He attacks the assigned. So what's the assignment? It won't look the same for everyone. But the heartbeat is always this. Your life becomes a signpost. Your walk becomes a sermon. Your presence becomes a sanctuary. People will feel peace around you and not know why. Others will confess secrets to you they've never told anyone. Still others will resent you because your existence reminds them of what they've buried. You won't be able to explain it. You'll just know. This is what I was made for. Esther had beauty, but her mark was courage. Moses had a stutter, but his mark was deliverance. Joseph had dreams, but his mark was provision for generations. That's you. Your mark is still unfolding, but it begins with one decision. Will you bury what God has entrusted to you, or will you multiply it? Grace picked up her pen, not to write something impressive, just to say yes. Yes to the mystery, yes to the call, yes to the weight of the marks and the assignment they demand. And suddenly the rain felt like a baptism, because once you know you're chosen, you're no longer allowed to live as if you're not. The marks were never random, they were proof. Now you know. Those moments you couldn't explain, they were the evidence. That feeling of being different, that wasn't loneliness. It was recognition. You've always carried something. You just didn't know what it meant. Until now. The signs were never random. The presence that shifted rooms, the animals and children drawn to you, the thoughts that came true without effort, all of it was God's fingerprint on your life. Not to make you feel superior, but set apart. You've just uncovered 3 sacred truths. You discern atmospheres before anyone speaks, because God needs someone on the front line of spiritual perception. You draw the innocent and broken, because your presence carries safety even when your words are few. You create with thought, not by accident, but by alignment. Your mind is not a mirror, it is a maker. And now comes the question heaven is still asking. Now that you know who you are, what will you build with it? Because revelation without responsibility becomes spiritual waste. God didn't reveal your marks to flatter you. He revealed them to activate you. Reflective question. What if the things you've been calling burdens were actually the blueprint for your assignment? You're not weak for being sensitive. You're not cursed for feeling too much. You're not imagining the shift when you walk in a room. You are marked. And those marks are messages. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. That's you. You weren't planted randomly. You were rooted with purpose. And now, chosen one, it's time to live as if it's true. You don't need permission. You don't need a title. You just need awareness. Because once you awaken, the world around you must respond, not to your noise, but to your alignment. So now breathe in this truth. You were never ordinary. You were never forgotten. You were never lost. You were always marked. You were always seen. You were always chosen. If this message stirred something in your soul, comment below. I carry the mark, and now I remember why. Let others find their reflection in your testimony. Share this video with someone who's always felt like they were too much. They may just realize they were never too much, only too anointed to stay hidden. And if you believe this message is part of your journey, support this mission, not for applause, but as a gift of love, so others can discover the sacred marks they carry too. Subscribe to this channel, because the next message goes even deeper, and it may be the one that finally explains why your whole life had to break before it made sense. You weren't chosen to be loud. You were chosen to be luminous, and your presence still speaks, even when you say nothing at all.